this morning. As John Bell would say, you're my peeps. So I'm touched to be up here to give the message. When Reverend Sandy was still with us, she approached me after the service one day and said, would I consider giving the message? And I said, I will certainly consider it. Excuse me. I went home and promptly panicked. What am I going to say? How do I say it? How do I impart to these special people? So I fretted and I fussed, and then I remembered, oh, give it over to God. And I did. And then presently, by and by, it occurred to me that this is not about me. I am not the main event here. I am the messenger. And I became calm. I felt my role and I moved forward. And that activity gave me the message, the topic for today, which is waiting on God. And I came to that technique many years ago, and I know it's not a new one for people in this room, but as Lafayette Seymour would say, we are the reminders. So waiting on God came to me first through The Golden Key by Emmett Fox. Many years ago, early 80s, I lived in New York City, and a friend of mine bought a house. And I'm not talking about a townhouse or a co-op. This was a 4-square big house in Brooklyn with a yard, and we were very impressed. And in the attic were cartons and cartons of leaflets, all by Emmett Fox. And guess what? It had been his house. Astonishing. So early on my spiritual path, I came to this pamphlet. So I'm going to read you the guts of The Golden Key here. As for the actual method of working, like all fundamental things, it's simplicity itself. He's quite a chatty person. All you have to do is this. Stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. This is the complete rule. And if you only do this, the trouble, whatever it is, will presently disappear. It makes no difference what kind of trouble it is. It may be a big thing or a little thing. It may concern health, finance, lawsuit, quarrel, an accident, anything else conceivable. But whatever it is, just stop thinking about it and think about God instead. That's all you have to do. Do not try to form a picture of God, which is of course impossible. Work by rehearsing anything or everything that you know about God. God is wisdom, truth, inconceivable love. God is present everywhere, has infinite power, knows everything, and so on. It matters not how well you may think you understand these things. Go over them repeatedly. But you must stop thinking of the trouble, whatever it is. The rule is to think about God. And if you're thinking about your difficulty, you're not thinking about God. To be continually glancing over your shoulder, as it were, in order to see how matters are progressing is fatal, because that is thinking about the trouble, and you must think about God and nothing else. Your object is to drive the thought of the difficulty right out of your consciousness for a few moments at least, substituting for it the thought of God. This is the crux of the whole thing. If you can become so absorbed in this consideration of the spiritual world that you really forget for a while all about the trouble concerning which you began to pray, you will presently find that you are safely and comfortably out of your difficulty. And the key word for this talk is presently. Not immediately, not when you think you know, but presently you will be out of your difficulty. And just because you get resolution, just because I felt that, oh, I'm with this program now, doesn't mean you don't relapse immediately, but you have a place to go that says, wait, I'm the messenger, it's not about me. And this leads me to another take on waiting on God. And one of the fun things I discovered about being the speaker is that you get to use all your favorite quotations. You can pick anything you want, so you're getting my top 10 here, but there aren't 10, so. About the ongoingness, when things relapse and you're back in the trouble and you want to check. This was a poem I discovered again many years ago, and not original. It's called The Difference. Many of you might have heard it. I got up early one morning and rushed right into the day. I had so much to accomplish that I didn't have time to pray. Problems just tumbled about me, and heavier came each task. Why doesn't God help me, I wonder? He answered, he didn't ask. I wanted to see joy and beauty, but the day toiled on, gray and bleak. I wondered why God didn't show me. He said, but you didn't see. I tried to come into God's presence. I used all my keys in the lock. God gently and lovingly chided, my child, you didn't knock. I woke up early this morning and paused before entering the day. I had so much to accomplish that I had to take time to pray. Now, again, what is the key that I wanted to communicate to you from the difference? Well, in the ongoingness of it, the key word here is knock. This author was trying all their keys in the lock, but the concept of just standing at the door and knocking, signaling, i.e. turning it over to God, is where we are. And just like waiting at a door, you knock, and you wait, and you wait, and then you begin to wonder, do I have the right time? Do I have the right day? And then if you're like me, they have a little letter slot, then you can flip open the letter slot, you look in and check it out. But as Emmett Fox would say, don't be continually glancing over your shoulder to see how matters are progressing, because that's thinking about the trouble, and you must think of God and nothing else. So how do we cope with knocking on the door, giving it over to God, and waiting? Of course, this is where the unity principle number 4 kicks in. There is power in affirmative prayer, which we believe increases our awareness of God. So that's the beauty of affirmations in waiting on God. It keeps your mind on God. Any of the unity affirmations, these are techniques that we all use. The light of God surrounds me, the love of God upholds me, the power of God protects me. Whatever you need to keep your mind in the best place. So we learn to turn it over to God, we learn to wait on God, and we learn to affirm while you're waiting. And what does waiting look like? And I know you're all thinking in your own lives that you've had waiting experiences, I hope. And some instances are voluntary and some are involuntary. But straight out of the Bible, who is the person who had to wait until he was 100 to fulfill the promise, or to get the fulfillment of the promise? And the hint is, of course, his wife was 90, which is Abraham. In Genesis 12, God promises, you will be the father of many nations. And Abraham says, great, I'm not the father of anybody at the moment, but God keeps promising. Genesis 13, Genesis 15, Genesis 17, you'll be the father of many nations, nothing's happening. And as you know, Abraham decides in his humanness to go and have a child with Sarah's handmaid, Ishmael. But that's not the right one. So by and by, in the fullness of time, presently, he has a child with Sarah at his age 100 and her 90, who is Isaac, the fulfillment of the promise. example comes from my own life, because I look back on this as evidence of waiting on God for the fulfillment at God's time, not mine. So I was married, and it was not going well, and I was sleeping in the guest room, which is not a good sign, as we know in marriage. And I've been there for months, so this was not a good sign. As we have heard before in this room, I was in the hallway. I was neither here nor there, but I was in the hallway for months. And then one morning, I woke up and turned over the most simple of motions, and boom, I knew it was time to move on. There's no explanation more than it came to me clearly. And the daily word from Thursday, July 13th of this very year, puts it really well in that resolution of that waiting period. The daily word was guidance. But it says, in the process of seeking answers in life, I may list pros and cons, research options, or consult with others to increase my knowledge and widen my perspective. Then comes the most important step, when I turn it all over to God. Divine guidance comes as insight with a feeling and a sense of rightness. It also brings peacefulness and joy in knowing the answer has come. This guidance comes in ways I cannot ignore and that my heart recognizes as true. And it doesn't mean that, again, in resolution, as we can see in our own lives, it doesn't mean that because you come to resolution it's easy. There's still work to do, but there isn't the burden of self-doubt. You're in motion, in work, without that burden of self-doubt. And it makes me feel more understanding of the words out of Isaiah, chapter 40, which is, even the youths shall faint, even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Again, just because you have resolution, you're moving forward, doesn't mean you don't have to run and walk and mount up. But you've got the momentum behind you. So again, turn it over to God, wait on God, affirm while waiting on God, resolution without self-doubt. So I couldn't help but think of we as a community together in our search for a minister, as an example. A lot of work has gone into that, from the committee, from the board, and it has been turned over to God, and we affirm every Sunday together, and we affirm every day for the right outcome to that. And it brings me to our first minister's book of Word, and Amalia Frank has a passage on wait. One of the words is wait. One of the most important qualities for us to develop is the ability to wait. We call it patience, but sometimes it appears to be more than patience. I once saw a sign that said, impatience is waiting in a hurry. So patience is waiting with the right attitude. When we remind ourselves that sometimes it's necessary to wait for things to happen, we must also realize that if experiences come to us before we're ready, we may not be able to handle them in a wise manner. So even though we become eager to see our prayers answered, and we feel frustrated by the necessity of waiting sometimes, we had better also understand that often the waiting period is a time for getting prepared to really fully enjoy that which we have longed for. It's essential to wait for a flower bud to open by itself. If we force it, it will die. An amaryllis that came to me seemed very slow in growing and in blossoming. Soon it had 4 magnificent pink and white blooms. If I had attempted to make it develop faster, it would have been destroyed. So let us begin building in ourselves the capacity to wait. Let us allow these things to develop in the perfect way, affirmed, without hurry, without delay, in a perfect way. God's good comes to me. Thank you.